So, we are doing profiles on competitive states for the upcoming 2024 election. And we are going to start this off with Arizona. Now, we have our election expert here with us today, Jersey Mike.
How's it going, everyone?
And he's going to give us his expert opinion on why he thinks Arizona will be red this coming election.
Thanks for having me on. And as we know, the thing that inspired us to make this video was we had some liberal nerd kind of upset that we predicted Arizona was going to go red. And he made a very not so compelling case on why it wouldn't. Now, before we get started, I just want to be very clear. We're not saying it's impossible for Arizona to go blue. We just don't see it as it being the most likely scenario given the environment of 2024.
Of course not.
So let's get started with our 2024 election prediction for Arizona. So right off the bat, we have solid counties that we don't even need to talk too much about because we already know how they're going to vote.
Mm-hmm.
First one, I believe this county is, I believe it's called Mojave County.
This one right here?
No, the one all the way to the west by Las Vegas. That borders Las Vegas, Nevada.
I know in the north of Arizona they've got these large Indian reservations. Is this going to be Dem County?
This one's actually solid red. This doesn't have a reservation in it.
Okay.
This one is one of the most solid Republican counties in the state of Arizona. I think like almost 70% of it voted for Donald Trump. And obviously, that ain't changing in 2024.
Okay, yeah.
Now we're going to put one of the most solidly blue counties in Arizona, which is the one in the center right here.
Okay.
That one has quite a few native reservations in it.
Look up their names. Mm-hmm. I understand there are big Navajo reservations or something out there. Cochino or Cocosino. Mm-hmm. I'm not pronouncing that right. We'll just call it Indian Reservation County. And obviously that's gonna go Dem. You know, they're just angry at the white man, and will never vote Republican. So, and I assume Navajo County will be similar, the county right next to it.
We got to be careful because there's two counties to the east. One votes Republican, one votes Democrat. I believe the one that borders New Mexico goes blue, and the one that is between the two goes red.
Okay.
That's simply just a difference of demographics there. And yep, I called it.
It's like light red on the.
Yeah, or likely red.
Likely red. And this is like also not as blue as I thought it would be. It looks like moderate blue. These both look moderately blue.
Yeah, under 60% Democrats. So it's not going to be a county that they're going to really rack up gigantic margins in.
If I remember correctly, there's probably some sort of I think there's a town in here that maybe is full of like retirees or something.
Could be Flagstaff.
Yeah, probably Flagstaff down here. Let's see what Flagstaff is. Flagstaff.
But then again, there's a county south of there where I think Flagstaff is, and that's solidly red.
Okay, maybe not. Oh, Flagstaff's in Indian Reservation County. Perhaps not. Well, it could be like Flagstaff suburbs could be important or something like that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, how are you feeling about the rest of the counties?
So the county directly south of the moderately red county is solidly red.
Okay. And that would be Gila County.
Yep. That's a solid red county. Trump won that overwhelmingly. Nothing's going to change with that one. And then directly to the west, the one that connects that with Mojave County over there.
Northwest, right here?
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be solid red?
Yep, that's also solidly red.
Okay. Seems like there's a red belt in Arizona.
Yeah, so what you have is like more rural areas there that tend to vote heavily Republican, except for the two counties up there that are mostly populated by Native Americans.
All right.
Now, keep in mind, the ones that are mostly populated by Native Americans don't have a huge population either. So even though they might be very blue, they're not really going to tip the margins in one extreme or the other.
They're pretty sparsely populated.
Yep.
I know there are very few Navajo left, unfortunately.
Right.
You may want to focus on the fact that it's a lot of the push to like the right, especially in Arizona, has to do with the Mexican border and immigration. I have a aunt that lives in Arizona who is extremely conservative and Trump-pilled because she lives very close. She lives in a border town, like right on the border of Mexico. And they have terrible immigration issues there and crime and really high unemployment rates. And that's pretty much the main reason why she even votes Republican to begin with.
Well, because there's like literally no border security with Democrats.
And I'd like to also point out, to add to her point, is also the fact that a majority of Hispanics who are voting support building a wall now. I know Red pointed that out in his video about Lauren Southern, about how the right has already largely won the culture war in terms of immigration issues.
Well, Hispanics are concerned with law and order as a general rule, and having no border security means literally anyone can cross over. And Donald Trump was very much right when he said a lot of the people crossing over, it's a porous border. If you want to be like not held accountable by law enforcement, one of the best places you can go is just right across the border to another country where you can disappear and be another person, or sort of move back and forth between the two in this zone of unaccountability which Democrats have created. But it seems like the next two counties, Graham and Greenlee counties in Arizona, will both be solid red right here.
Both of those voted for Trump above 60%. One was Greenlee voted for Trump with 65%, and Graham voted for Trump with 72% of the vote.
Okay.
So once again, those are more rural counties where there's a lot of white working class voters there, as well as some Hispanic working class voters who are now tending to shift more towards the right.
Well, I've also, that was another big point. One of the reasons that Arizona will probably be red this election cycle is that there's sort of like 5 or so core demos that need to be won. One of those being, well, 5 or so core demos that are like 5 or so core demos in Arizona that are important. So those would be suburban whites, retirees, Mormons, low-income Hispanics, and then also Native Americans. And basically why Arizona is likely to actually go red this election cycle is because Biden is not doing well enough with low-income Hispanics. This is a demographic that usually Democrats kind of edge out and win, but this time Biden will not have the margins based on his polling numbers to actually win them over, so he won't be able to create a strong enough coalition to win. Trump wins retirees, Biden obviously wins Native Americans, Trump wins Mormons, and then suburban whites are, of course, leaning Dem, leaning Biden. But Biden support will not be strong enough among low-income Hispanics for him to actually pull off a win in Arizona. That's the thrust of why Arizona will likely be red.
And with that, I'd like to talk about the most important county right now in Arizona, if we can, Maricopa County.
Maricopa, of course.
That's basically Phoenix and all of the suburban areas there.
Right.
So I believe Biden will win Maricopa,
Okay.
but less so than in 2020. He only won it by 2 points in 2020. I think it's going to be near even. I'm seeing maybe Biden by less than a point.
Wow. Okay.
Just because there are a lot of working class Hispanic voters in Phoenix.
Right.
And with urban areas starting to shift to the right, I really don't see the Democrat advantage in the suburban areas growing faster than the shifts happening in the urban areas.
Well, isn't it true also that low or working class Hispanics in urban areas, like the people in Phoenix, are going to vote the same way as the people in what do you call it?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
Yes, very similar cities with very similar demographics. But I would argue the Dems at this point are already, in 2020, were already maxed out with how good they were going to do with suburban voters. Like, they won over a lot more moderate, former like Romney Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a lot of people in the suburbs that aren't going to vote Democrat. They don't like the Democrats' idea of getting rid of zoning laws, which would allow their suburban towns to become urbanized. That's a big issue I hear among suburban voters. And a lot of them vote with how they feel the economy is doing, and simply if they're not making money, they're not going to stick with the current guy in power.
Oh, and I've also heard elsewhere that Biden is down with every single core Democratic constituency. The only group of people
He's
that Biden...
down with white women. I thought I heard that.
Yes, he is. He's down with white women.
Or like white suburban women or white women with a 4-year college degree or something like that.
Do you have a 4-year college degree?
Yes.
Are you voting Biden?
No.
Well, there you have it, folks. Well, he's down with every... Except for, like, I think it was even... That was the toss-up, was, like, actually college-educated whites. There are some polls that say he's up by, like, 1 point with, like, high-income college-educated whites, and then others that say he's actually down a point. So even that group is, like, the one group he could potentially be up with is debatable. How are you feeling about these southern counties right here?
So the two southern counties to the west are both solidly red.
Okay. So that would be La Paz and Yuma.
Yep, both of those counties are counties very close to the southern border, and immigration is the top issue for voters in that area.
Okay. And Trump has already won just by the inclusion of these two counties.
Yeah, Trump won Yuma by 2020 by 2020 standards. Even though Yuma has some suburbs from California suburban voters from California there. Trump still won it by a pretty good 8-point showing, so I think that county's going to shift slightly to the right. It might be 12 points this time around. And then the other one is just completely solid red. Trump won over 60% of the vote there.
Okay. Powerful. Dragon energy. How about these other southern counties? How are you feeling about those?
Well, it depends on which one we're talking about. So the ones all the way near the New Mexico border are pretty red. The one that touches the border is moderately red, while the two above it are solidly red.
Right.
I think the moderately red one is going to shift to the right just because of the immigration problems happening in the area.
Total lack of accountability there.
I think the two on top are going to shift slightly to the right, but the debate is how much is Trump maxed out there already.
Right.
And with these blue counties, I think they're going to say light to moderately blue, but at the same token, these counties have a lot of Hispanics in them, and if Hispanics trend right, you're going to see the margins for Biden pretty much decrease.
Okay.
So it comes to the conclusion now on why I really believe Trump is favored in Arizona, and that is because he's gaining among more of Arizona's demographics than Biden is. Even if Biden makes a few gains with suburban voters, which is debatable, I really think 2020 was his watermark there. Even if he still makes some gains there, it's going to be undone by all the gains Trump is making with Hispanic voters in Arizona. This isn't like a northeastern state where Hispanics are only 10% of the population. Hispanics are a very large portion of Arizona's population. I think they're almost 30% of the vote. It's kind of like how in Georgia, where black voters have an outsized share of the power there because they're at over 30%. So I really think because Trump is making gains among the Hispanic community and among urban voters, those gains are going to be more than the gains Biden makes among any high-income whites that are in the area. And that's still debatable if he does any better than he does in 2020 among those groups.
So this is our final assessment for what the map for Arizona will likely look like.
And if you want to go by statewide margin, I think it's going to be R+3. I think it's going to be close to where we had it in 2016.
Right.
Just because if you look at as we talked about in our other election prediction video, if you look at the elasticity of Arizona, the voters there are pretty elastic, meaning the state will shift more than the nation will depending on which direction the nation shifts. So if the nation shifts to the right by 1 point, Arizona will shift more than 1 point to the right. Keep in mind, Biden only won this state by 0.3% in 2020. He only won it by a third of a percent. Just a 1% shift would make Arizona a Trump state again.
Yeah.
And with the demographic groups we talked about, I just don't see Arizona shifting to the left or staying stagnant. I think it's going to shift to the right, and because Trump only needs to make up 2/3 of a percentage point of margin to win it, I think it's very likely that it goes back to the Republican column. What do you think, Red?
I think I think you've given a very strong case for Arizona going red in 2024. I would say I agree with our view of it in the beginning, that it's not necessarily the most solid red of the swing states, but I think you've made a very strong case that that it will be red in 2024. However, we have some detractors. We have some detractors who disagree with us. We have some butthurt from the liberals. Some liberals watched our last election prediction video, and they have some things to say. So I figured, for the interest of just examining where the country's at, this is informative. Examining where liberals' heads generally are at, this is informative. This guy was literally seething. He left like a ridiculous number of comments on my video when I made it. I wouldn't give him any more attention than I'm already giving him, but I figured he also has a lot of the same sort of distortions that you hear the liberal media promoting. So I thought it would be good to like break those down and really analyze how the system is lying to Americans and what they want you to believe, because this is what this guy's propagating.
So let's just start with his first comment about how he said that on the election video, on how he said that there was no chance Trump would win Arizona.
Right.
This guy is ignoring trends. He's ignoring something that we talked about called elasticity, and how a state shifts relative to the nation.
Right.
And he's also ignoring the fact that Arizona was not a solid blue win for Biden 4 years ago.
Definitely not.
He had the state just gone had the state just gone a half a percentage more towards Trump, Trump would have narrowly won it.
Yeah.
So currently the national environment is Trump plus 3.5. Last time I checked, Real Clear Politics. That means the country is already shifted. It was Democrat 4.5 in 2020. So if you take a look, 4.5 gets it to 0, 3.5 gets it, and then after that, another 3 points gets it to 3.5. So the country has already shifted 7 to 8 points to the right compared to where it was 4 years ago. So if the nation shifts 8 points to the right and Arizona is fairly elastic, there is no way a Democrat margin of 0.3% is going to hold in that scenario. Now, I'm not saying Trump's going to win the popular vote by 3 points. That's just where it is right now.
Right.
Let's be generous to Biden and say Trump only wins it by 1. That's still a 5-point shift from 2020.
Right.
In a 5-point shift, if Trump wins very narrowly, even in an even shift where Trump breaks even nationally in the popular vote, those shifts are still strong enough to flip Arizona.
Right.
On top of that, our detractor also tried to say abortion would save Biden in Arizona, and that's simply not the case. I'm not cherry-picking polls. You can look at the last 10 to 12 polls done. They asked the question on who the voters are voting for president first, and then they asked the question on abortion. Trump's lead is still held in every poll since the referendum was announced. Trump played the abortion issue very smartly by saying that he was just going to let the states decide what they want to do individually on that issue.
I completely agree.
So the abortion issue is no longer something Democrats can really attack Trump for, because he is telling them, look, you and your state policies are going to decide it, not me. So after that, if the state, there's plenty of voters who are going to vote for Trump and they're going to vote pro-choice on abortion. They might not be the most conservative people, but if they're hurting economically and they're upset about immigration,
Yeah.
they're going to let their vote for president be decided on those issues, and then because they have the power to choose their own abortion policy, they'll vote whatever way they decide to on that.
Exactly, and I think that I find it to be very tactical. I mean, what a lot of people seem to not understand in the Republican Party, especially, is they want a total ban on abortion. And you said something earlier about the people associated with DeSantis, the DeSantis campaign, going after Trump for not advocating for a total ban. I'm like, I would prefer a total ban, but you have to create a culture of life before you just go around trying to ban things. I don't think it was electorally viable. I think Trump understands this. I think his choice is very sensible in taking what you can get when you get it. And I think also the Democratic overestimation of the importance and relevance of the abortion issue was how we performed in 2022.
Yes, and I'd like to get into 2022 next because this individual is using 2022 to predict 2024. I'll be frank with the viewers right now. If you take a look at the nationwide polls in 2022, they weren't wrong. The nationwide polls had the Republicans winning the national popular vote for Congress by 2.3 points. The Republicans won by 2.5. So even if you take a look at 2022's results and you look at how everybody voted for Congress, the result would still be an electoral college win for the Republicans. We won the majority of the popular vote for Congress in most of the states. Now, I will say where the polls were wrong is the Republicans did have some poor quality with candidates for statewide office.
Well, two notable examples being Sheikh Mehmet the Unconquerable, and I like both these candidates. I thought they were very meme-worthy, although I understand why they lost in both cases. And of course, werewolf movie watcher Herschel Walker. Those were some bad choices. And what this guy doesn't understand is that Democratic victory. We also predicted too. Like I remember we did a special election prediction back on the old channel with Minnesota District 1, and we predicted from the turnout in Minnesota District 1 that Republicans would underperform and that there wouldn't be a red wave. And this was before all the talk about abortion really kicked into high gear. Like, we predicted there would be this underperformance of Republicans because a lot of the candidates that were run weren't Trump-style candidates. They were libertarian candidates. And this is simply not what Republican voters want anymore.
Well, the other thing I'd like to add into that is Trump brings out low propensity voters that don't tend to vote in other elections.
That's true.
The fact that you're using 2022, an election where you just have normie Democrats and normie Republicans voting, and you're leaving out the fact that Trump brings out a lot of other voters that don't tend to vote in off-year elections, is something that could still make the case that Trump could be possibly underestimated in some scenarios. I'm not saying he's underestimated right now. I'm saying that his voters are a lot harder to poll than your average suburbanite Republican or Democrat voters.
Yeah.
Like, for an example, let me explain it in this sense. In 2012, Mitt Romney was overestimated, and that is because his voters often answered polls more than Obama voters did. His voters were mainly concentrated in suburbs. They had the time to take an online poll or answer the phone, and they were doing pretty well off. 2016 underestimated Trump, and even 2020 underestimated Trump because most of Trump's voters are working class voters that don't tend to vote. They don't tend to pay attention to politics before he got in. And these people are harder to poll. They don't answer polls.
Yeah, would you answer a poll?
I've never been polled once.
I wouldn't answer a poll. If you were polled, would you even answer it?
No.
there we have it.
But on top of that, if you take a look at Trump's support compared to Democrat support, Trump's support gives him a slight edge in the Electoral College because his votes are distributed in a wider range of states that would take to win the Electoral College, while most Democrat votes are concentrated on both sides of the coast. Democrats have what people would call a lot of wasted votes in California and New York because those votes already decide solidly blue states, but they have no power when it comes to the swing states. I like that guy who backed you up in the comments. That was great.
He was
really,
good.
He really tore him.
He was a real patriot. Really tore him a new one.
But let's go to the point where this guy admits that he predicted Biden would win Iowa in 2020.
Oh yeah, where did he say that?
He said that he made a 2020 prediction. The only state that he got wrong was Iowa. He was bragging about how he had the most accurate model in 2020 and that he only got 1 out of 50 states wrong.
Let's read it here. Assuming you're an election denier from 2020, so don't talk about math. LMAO. Only state I got wrong in 2020 was Iowa. In fairness, though, judging by your high-pitched voice, I'm not certain you could even vote then, LMAO. This guy doesn't even know how old I am. Jeez Louise.
And let's get back to what he said. Like, even though he claims to have an impressive track record,
There's no way he predicted Georgia. I think he's lying. He's lying through his teeth.
Here's the thing. Missing Iowa is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Trump won Iowa by 9 points in 2020.
Yeah. Solid red. What demographic group in Iowa would have voted Biden? Like who is even winning? This guy is clearly a liar. Who would have voted for him in Iowa? Like there are all the Union Dems there have flipped red. Like it's delusional that this guy thinks.
Because here's the thing: back in the old days, like let's go back to like 2000 and even in the 80s and 90s, Iowa was a swing state because you had two halves of the state.
Right.
You had very conservative evangelical Christian voters on one end, and then on the other hand, you had some union voters and you had some farmers that were dependent on government subsidies.
Right.
And if you take a look, it had a blue streak in the late 80s and early 90s because of the 1980s farm crisis. The government didn't really do anything to help the farmers there, and they kind of blamed Reagan for it. In 2000, Gore narrowly won it. In 2004, Bush narrowly won it. And then in 2016, Trump overwhelmingly won it. And then same thing in 2020.
Right.
Trump, I think, gave a lot of these union voters the best of both worlds. He had their economic interests in mind, along with having their socially conservative views on immigration and some social issues as well.
Yeah, what I see with this guy posting, he really doesn't understand the demographics behind each state. He has a very superficial, shallow understanding of why people vote the way they do. I don't know what he's responding to here. He said in 2020 was closer to a swing state with only like a 2 to 3% disparagement, which had been gradually shrinking. A lot of liberal mayos moving there as well. What you expected a red wave, Nevada and Arizona to go red, we did not. We did not expect a red wave.
I did not predict a red wave, and Red had an old channel where he literally said in August of 2022 there is no red wave.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he's making assumptions, and on top of that, I like to remind him, look at how Arizona voted in the generic congressional vote.
Right.
Carrie Lake was a controversial candidate. You can love her or hate her, but at the end of the day, she was perceived controversial, and I'm sure the media did a number on her.
Right.
On top of that, though, the thing you have to keep in mind is she lost by only 1%.
Right. That's very narrow.
And if you look at how Arizona voted down ballot, look at the congressional race. 56% of the state voted for Republican candidates in the congressional race. So if we look at the range of outcomes from D+1 in Carrie Lake's performance or D+12 on the congressional performance, Trump is going to perform somewhere between those two, or R+12 on the congressional level. Trump's going to perform somewhere between those two numbers, and most of those outcomes are in a situation where Trump wins.
He said, yes, I imagine you guessed every single state correctly then, LMAO.
Nobody guessed every state correctly. You want to look at 2020. I mean, the most...
I said we actually guessed every state correctly except for Georgia.
Yeah, my map was closer in 2020, was closer than the liberal media's because they were saying Ohio would be blue, Texas would be blue, North Carolina would be blue.
Yeah.
I mean...
This guy literally thinking Iowa would go blue. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's responding to here. He said, probably closer to 1 to 2%. If it's +5, I'll eat my tongue. But surely, buddy, you got to realize you're just circle jerking. The best bet is simply that voters do not come out. Otherwise, it'll be competitive. Even my prediction is a Trump victory, but that's not because of Trump and more because of depressed Biden turnout. I don't know what he's responding to specifically here.
I think he might be talking about Georgia there. I think the guy defended you talked about how Georgia was not a toss-up.
That's right. This guy was like, Trump will win Virginia, but not Georgia. I thought that was so ridiculous.
Well, he said Trump would win Virginia, but not Pennsylvania, and that Georgia would go either way.
Right. That was it. In terms of redness, here's states from reddest to least red in the upcoming election: Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, Virginia, Maine, New Mexico, Colorado.
I'd like to make a quick correction. Maine is actually to the right of Virginia.
Really?
Maine was single digits even in 2020. Virginia was D plus 10 in 2020.
Well, we're talking about likelihood. I don't know that Maine will be able to. Even though like I can see what you're saying in the sense that Virginia is bluer than Maine. I think in terms of like track record though, Maine has still been and performed in a way that's more reliably blue. But anyways, what's relevant here is the fact that this guy thinks that what did he say?
He thinks Pennsylvania's going to be to the left of Virginia.
Yeah, which is just insane.
Yeah.
What do you mean? No, there's like literally all those rural counties in Pennsylvania, like. And not only was it just Pennsylvania being to the left of Virginia, he thought Georgia would be to the left of Virginia.
Virginia's going to be red too.
This election, I wouldn't go that far. We can hope.
I will say if he picks Youngkin, there's a chance it'll go red. If he doesn't pick Youngkin, it'll be narrowly blue. But I don't see it unless Biden like really just shits the bed and like shits himself on television in front of a group of people.
That could happen again. I mean, he already said that Putin was the leader of Ukraine.
And he called his Vice President Trump too. He said instead of Vice President Harris, he said Vice President Trump.
He's so senile.
I mean, the way I'm seeing it, Red, is I just see I see ad hominems and assumptions here. Like he's assuming you and these other people were in a certain camp when you really weren't. Like he's making assumptions about you without knowing you, and he's basically saying. He's basically providing his take on the election margins, but I just don't see the math and the data that backs him up.
Yeah, I mean, and the only thing that he really has to back up his assumption is he says right here, Arizona is going blue due to the abortion on the ballot. Like that's the one reason he has for Arizona going blue. Like that's what he thinks is going to move the needle. There's no science. There's no understanding of demographics. There's nothing else to back this up other than, people are motivated by abortion enough that Arizona will go blue. Well, delusions like this guy has are what happens when not only are you a Democrat, but you don't listen to the red channel's election. Delusions like this are what happens not only when you're a Democrat, but when you don't listen to the red channel's election coverage. You come here, folks. You get the truth. You get the most insight, the most science, demographic, income science on elections. You can't beat it here. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And Jersey Mike and I will be covering elections. Jersey Mike and I will be covering the election extensively. And that's it for this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.